Big get for LSU today, as you probably heard in recruiting. Garrett Dellinger committed to LSU. He is the number 79 overall prospect in the country, so a top 100 prospect in the country. He's the number 12 offensive tackle in the country. He's the number 5 player in the state of Michigan, and he's now committed to LSU over Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. LSU went into Big Ten country and plucked away the biggest offensive line recruit. 6'6", 290 is what he has himself listed on his Twitter page right now. And LSU got him for the class of 2021, one of the best offensive tackles in the country, now pledged to the Tigers. Huge tip of the cap to Ed Ogeron, James Craig for going up to Michigan and landing yet another prominent offensive lineman. They did it with Anthony Bradford 2 years ago as well. And you look at Joe Barksdale, Anthony Bradford, Garrett Dellinger. LSU's had some success cherry-picking offensive linemen out of the state of Michigan. But we had Shea Dixon with us an hour ago. And Shea earlier today wrote a piece at Go247 naming the top 10 offensive line recruits at LSU since the year 2000. So over the last 20 years, the top 10 offensive line recruits, here they are, in order. Lyle Collins was the number 3 overall player in the country back in 2011, the number 1 offensive lineman. Ben Wilkerson, the number 13 overall prospect in the country in 2001. Number 3, Andrew Whitworth, who was the number 38 overall prospect in 2001. Maya Tehuma was ranked 37th. Austin Deculus ranked 48th. Herman Johnson, 59th. Ethan Posick, 57th. But they go by ratings, excuse me. It's not just by ranking, by their player rating is how they rank these out. Ryan Miller was the 77th best prospect coming out of Barb back in 2004. Rudy Neiswanger, and now Garrett Dellinger. Yo, that's some pretty rarefied air. But you know what stood out to me more when I was looking at this? 20 years. It's a 20-year sample. The 10 highest-rated offensive linemen to come to LSU over the last 20 years. Of the 10, 5 were signed by Nick Saban. Real quick, this is not a Nick Saban topic. 5 were signed by Nick Saban. Wilkerson, Whitworth, Herman Johnson, Ryan Miller, Rudy Neiswanger. 5 were signed by Nick. 3 were signed by Les Miles. Lyle Collins, Maya Tehuma, and Ethan Posick. Les, of course, had 12 signing classes at LSU. 3 among the top 10 offensive linemen of the past 20 years. And then Ed Ogeron's had 2. Although he was late in the process, he still signed Austin Deculus, and now he's got Garrett Dellinger committed. I mentioned this isn't a Nick Saban topic. And it's also not a Les Miles topic. But in many respects, it does explain what happened with Les, aside from quarterback play. Like, we know that's what happened with LSU, is they just kept missing at the most important position in sports, really. But Les built the program around interior line play. Is that fair to say? Like, they wanted to be a run-heavy team, throw off a play action. Well, in 12 years, Les only recruited 3 of the top 10 offensive linemen of the past 20 years at LSU. And one of them, Maya Tehuma, didn't finish his career here, obviously. Got into some off-the-field trouble and didn't finish. Posick was spectacular, and Lyle Collins were both spectacular. But Les was a line of scrimmage coach, but he faltered here. And again, and I'm going to get to a point, it's not to bag on Les, but it does sort of illustrate, with the benefit of hindsight now, what happened. When you look at LSU's offensive linemen that were drafted under Les Miles, take a guess. 12 years, how many offensive linemen were drafted from Les Miles teams? What if I told you it was 5? Herman Johnson, who signed with Nick, by the way. Joe Barksdale, Trey Turner, Vidal Alexander, Gerald Hawkins. That's it. That's the list. The only offensive lineman that LSU had drafted under Les Miles. Now, it is worth throwing out the caveat that Lyle Collins clearly would have been a first-round pick, but had a very unfortunate situation thrown on his lap the week of the draft. But that illustration does go to show how much of a difference there's been, or a focus on both lines of scrimmage since Ed Orgeron has been the coach. And I think one thing that was obvious is when LSU was in the middle of that losing streak to Alabama, the place where clearly there was a massive gap between the two programs was at the line of scrimmage. It wasn't at quarterback, y'all. During that losing streak, you were talking about guys like Greg McElroy and A.J. McCarron, and who was the big kid that transferred from Florida State that won a national title? I don't even remember the kid's name. But that's Coker, Jake Coker. Blake Sims, who had a 3,000-yard passing season but was a converted running back. It wasn't like Bama was reeling in, like, Tua. They weren't having, like, 5-star number 1 quarterbacks in the country. They were just better at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. Vastly better than LSU. And that's where the massive difference came. LSU had skill guys. Neither team was elite at quarterback. Bama was so much better on the offensive line and the defensive line. Ed's fixing that. Fair? I think it's not even a question on the defensive line. You got a defensive line coach who's the head coach who knows how to recruit that position and develop that position. And yesterday, Ed was on with OTB, and he said, I'm paraphrasing, he said, look, I'm looking at my defensive line board. I got 25 guys up there. There's no question they've developed depth there. And you're starting to see it on the offensive line as well, through recruiting and through development. That unit last year went from being maligned in 2018 to having the same guys and being the best unit in college football. And now you come back this year, and you've got Deculus, who's on this list, by the way. Deculus was the 48th best player in the class when he signed in 2017. You got Ed Ingram, who's a total stud. You're hoping you see a lot from guys like Chase and Hines. Anthony Bradford, who's a guy that Ed signed and may well be your starting right guard. We'll see what Dale Rosenthal does. But now you've got the cavalry coming behind them as well. We've talked so much about the need to improve the quarterback position, but the biggest reason, the single biggest reason there was a difference between LSU and Bama over that 8-game losing streak wasn't quarterback play. It was line play. It was taking an undefeated team to Tuscaloosa with Leonard Fournette and having him run for 30 yards on 16 carries because you couldn't move their defensive line. This is how you change that. Big get today for LSU. Garrett Dellinger out of Michigan pledges to the Tigers. They'll have a chance to sign in the early period in December. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.